Hi, it's Penny here. So last week I did the Read-O-Rama readathon. It went from the 9th to the 15th of March, and there were 7 challenges. I didn't complete all the challenges, but I thought today I would just do a quick wrap-up of which challenges I did complete and what I thought about the books that I read. So working our way through the challenges, the first challenge was to read 7 books. I did not do that one, so we will skip over it. The second challenge was to read your most anticipated book on your TBR. So for that, I read In an Absent Dream by Sean M. Maguire. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series, which is a series which follows different children who at some point have come across their door, like Alice in Wonderland or Narnia, those kind of things. And when they've come back, they have been very upset because they missed the world that they found through their door, and they then end up in this halfway home for Wayward Children, which is just to help people deal with being back in the crappy real world. This 4th book tells the story of kind of the owner, teacher, adult of that halfway home, Lundy, when she went through her door to the Goblin Market. So in the beginning, I wasn't too sure about the Goblin Market and how I might feel about it, but in the end, I thought it was absolutely delightful. I loved the world. It made so much sense to me. I also really liked the commentary that was weaved into the story about the free market and capitalism. There's also a bit in here about sexism and the expectations that are put on girls because of that. And actually, I think the theme that I enjoyed the most from this book was the theme of family. So in this book, when Lundy comes back from her world, she has to deal with her family having missed her, even though she was having a great time off in the Goblin Market. And obviously that's quite conflicting because she also does love her family. So she wants to be off in this other world, but obviously her family doesn't want her to be in that other world. And I really liked how upfront her sister was in confronting that issue. The only real problem that I had with this book is there were parts where we essentially just skip over a huge part of the story. Like, there is a whole character, quite an important character, who was introduced and killed off in one sentence. Like, hey, here's this really important character. We had a whole massive big adventure and they died. One sentence. That should have been at least a chapter, if not a whole nother book. And there were other parts of the story where things were just kind of like skipped over because they weren't really the focus of this book, but they were really important, and it seemed really weird that that part of the story would be skipped over like that. So in the end, I did give it 4 stars just because I feel like this is quite a short book, and if it had just been filled out a little bit more, it could have been like a full, proper novel. Then next after that, I listened to the audiobook of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Now I do have the physical copy. This is a book that is on my physical TBR. I've been trying to get rid of it. I guess I phrase it like that because I always knew I wasn't particularly going to like this book. It was hyped a lot on BookTube, which is why I initially bought it. But since then, I've come to realize that I just need to skip books that I can tell are just going to be trashy romance pretending to be a fantasy story. I mean, if some people like this, and that's fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it's just not the kind of thing that I enjoy. I tend to just think that Sarah J. Maas has a bit of a fetish for fae males that she has imagined, and these are all just her indulging in that fetish. Which again, is fine, but not for me. I will also say I didn't think any of the characters seemed particularly realistic, especially like the bad guy or the bad lady. What was that? And Feyre herself, I assumed from the title and a few hints in the story that she was supposed to be the thorny one, but she just kind of seemed very meh and plain and nice and not very thorny at all, really. I guess if you don't know, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's told where a woman called Feyre kills a animal. It turns out to be a fae, and so as punishment she has to go and live with the fae obviously it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so she meets a guy, they fall in love. So I read this for the challenge to read a book that you wanted to read in 2018 because I think that I was planning to read this last year. Anyway, I got to it this year, so that's something. Then I picked up this essay collection called Men Explain Things to Me and Other Essays by Rebecca Solnit. This is a book I got in a book fair a while ago. So I read this book for the challenge to read the shortest book on your TBR. I'm also doing this thing at the moment where every month I try to read the shortest book on my physical TBR because I'm trying to just reduce that physical TBR down. So this book I was also planning to read for that purpose. It is super short, like 130 pages. In the end, I only gave it 2 stars. I did think the first couple of essays had some good points and they seemed quite interesting, but the next few just were confusing and didn't really seem to have any point. It was just a lot of trying very hard to sound fancy and intellectual, which I never really enjoy. I did think the last couple of essays redeemed it a little bit in that they were a little bit more positive and not such a downer, because the first couple of essays really made me question whether humanity should even continue. It was very depressing. But the last couple were much more talking about what we can actually do to make things better, which I appreciated. There were some good ideas, but just overall, I didn't particularly like the writing style. I thought the middle was very lost. And I also thought a lot of the time she tended to state opinion as if it was fact and not really give any evidence as to why she thought that. So it was a little bit disappointing, but at least it was quick. So then the next challenge was to read a host pick. And I actually got a book out of the library, especially for this. I hacked the library system and got the large print edition so that I didn't have to wait in the queue. But I never got to this, unfortunately. I do still want to read this, so hopefully I will be able to get to that before I have to return it to the library. Then the next challenge was to blindly grab a book from your TBR. So from this, I just picked a book from my audiobook list because I was able to read an audiobook at the time, and I picked up The Forgetting by Sharon Cameron. So this is a story about a city where every 12 years, everyone in the city forgets everything. They have these books that they carry around with them all the time. They write everything in it that happens to them, and then when they wake up again with no memories, they can look in the book and figure out who they are and what's happened. But there's a lot of tricksy stuff that goes on because of that. And also, our main character doesn't forget for some reason, some unknown reason. I will say, I think I ruined this book for myself a little bit because in the middle I was reading it on and off, and I listened to it in lots of little tiny pieces, so I lost a bit of the momentum in the middle. But the last bit I listened to in a big chunk, and I kind of got back into it. And I really enjoyed how it was revealed what was really going on. I thought there was quite a lot of different conspiracies going on, and they were revealed in a way that kind of kept things moving. I also again really liked the way that it looked at the impact on families that this forgetting had. So obviously you wake up, you don't remember your children or your parents or your brothers and sisters, and you read in a book that that's who they are. So it kind of looked at, in that situation, would you still have that same connection with your family? So I really enjoyed it, and in the end I gave it 4 stars. Then lastly, for the challenge to read a book with Rama in the title, oh yes, actually I should admit I didn't actually finish The Forgetting within the time frame. I finished it a little bit after, but like I'm unofficially counting it because I still did read it for the readathon. I just didn't finish it. You know, close enough. So the next book is the same. I started reading it during the readathon, but I just didn't finish it. And I was reading this one for the challenge to read a book with Rama in the title, and I was also cheating on that. So I was reading The Aeronaut's Windlass by Jim Butcher. So I was basically saying Rama, which is not true. It's not right, but I'm cheating, so it's counting. This book, though, in the end was a bit of a disappointment. It kind of is set in this world where people no longer live on the surface of Earth. They live in these spires that kind of, I don't really know what they're like. There wasn't a lot of good explanation of the world, even though it seemed like there was probably a lot of really cool ideas about how the world would work. It wasn't well explained. But I did really enjoy the etherealists. Oh, that's hard to say. Basically, the magicians of the world, they're all a bit crazy. And I really enjoyed how crazy they were and the funny ways that they would deal with the world. I also really enjoyed the cat society. So, in this world, basically, humans tend to think of cats as like cats and they don't really have much respect for their intelligence. Whereas the cats have the capability of talking to humans who can speak cat. And the cats also don't really trust humans' intelligence. They think of humans as these big lumbering beasts that are sometimes useful, but, not as good as cats. And I just thought that it was so exactly what cats would be like if their society was just a little bit more human or a little bit more open to us. So there were some things I really loved about the story. However, unfortunately, there was not really much plot. It's basically the start of a war between two of these spires. And I don't normally like books that are about war anyway, so there were a lot of battle scenes and a lot of just conversations that didn't really seem to matter. And a lot of this thing where, the characters keep making these logical jumps that just seem so unlikely that anyone would ever put things together. Or like they're like, well, of course I figured this out, even though it's just as likely that something else could have been true given all the facts that they knew. But of course, all the characters are all so smart. So yes, I ended up skimming about the last third of this book because I could already see how things were going to end and it was all just kind of unnecessary. So those are all the books that I read for Read-O-Rama. I guess I completed 3 challenges officially, 5 unofficially. Either way, I was happy with my reading for the week. Do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about today because I would love to talk to you about them down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time.